Happening right now, fire officials updating us on that massive fire burning near a recycling plant. Let's listen in.
They did kind of push the fire away from the building that's behind us. If the winds would have come out the other way, that structure would have been much more heavily involved. It kind of did, there was some impingement into that structure, but the fire since pushed away from that. Now they're also focusing on the wildland aspect of this with the winds that we have. So that's also turned into a multi-alarm wildland fire. We now have Bernalillo County, of course, Albuquerque Fire. Corrales is now responding with some units, and we also have Kirtland Air Force Base. We might get some crash trucks from Kirtland Air Force Base, and that's what's going to help start to actually extinguish these fires that are involving these plastics, which can be very difficult to extinguish.
I think a big question is, the smoke right now and the chemicals. Is that safe that we're breathing that in right now? What do you tell folks out there?
So the LT and I talked about this earlier. It said we are lucky with the way that the winds are pushing right now. There's that kind of really far south area of Albuquerque that might be involved with Four Hills, areas of South Wantabo Hills, Mirabel, some of those neighborhoods up into the canyon, into Carnuel. But if you have a swamp cooler, I hate to tell anybody to turn it off with this kind of weather, but you definitely don't want to be sucking this smoke that's involving these kind of plastics into your home. So keep your windows shut, keep your swamp coolers off if you can tolerate it, and we have no immediate evacuation zones or anything that we're trying to implement now. Just telling people to stay inside, turn off swamp coolers if they can, and keep their windows closed.
And again, I want to reinforce what Lieutenant Fair just indicated earlier. We are very fortunate that the wind is driving this into an area that is pretty much unpopulated areas of the base right now. And the base is fully aware of that. As they see fit for their facilities, they'll remove people, or have them shelter in place as needed for their facilities. But for the most part, with the direction that this is moving, it's moving into unpopulated areas, or the heavy smoke is moving into unpopulated areas, and that's to our benefit on this. Now, if, again, as Lieutenant indicated, if that does change direction, if we do see people in those southern, easternmost portions of the city or county area that are experiencing maybe some of that smoke smell and maybe some of that black smoke coming into their area, then obviously they're advised to either shelter in place and turn off their air conditioner units, or maybe consider just kind of leaving that area for a little while the smoke kind of dissipates and works its way out of the area.
What type of approach do you guys take when you are dealing with this type of a fire?
So in this kind of case, basically this has become a very organic and evolutionary type of fire. Initially coming in as a small fire, we got resources on site and realized this was going to grow very quickly. The types of hydrocarbons and plastics that are burning behind us, the wind-driven fire that pushed them, caused them to spread into everything from their new materials that were getting ready to go out to customers to some of their small, fibrous, already broken down recycled materials that are on site that they use to make new pipes. So the fact of the matter is this was a fire that was destined to just kind of grow very rapidly, and the types of heat and the types of smoke and flames that this puts out, it's very difficult for you to kind of get ahead of it right away when it's outside and wind driven like this. If it's inside a structure where there's maybe like a suppression system involved, hopefully you could kind of get a hit on that fire right away from the suppression system and knock it down, and then we could get units in there. But with this kind of system, with this kind of way that this is happening out here, this fire is just going to grow really rapidly. So our best bet for this is we're going to surround the areas and protect as much of the exposures as we can, that being the buildings and facilities just to the north of this, the wildland areas that are out there, and we're going to do our best to try to slowly work and douse this plastic. But the types of plastic this is burns very hot, very quickly, and it's something that water just doesn't quickly and easily put out. That's why we have additionally asked for those resources from the Kirtland Air Force Base to come out and give us a hand with maybe laying down some pretty heavy foam onto this. And we also have assistance from even local contractors. Guzman sent out one of their big water trucks that was in the area to try to help supply water for this. So it is definitely an all-out effort from a lot of different entities.
And as the LT mentioned, these are very, very difficult fires to put out. And even with the amounts of water that we can put on these fires, we're not making a lot of headway. So as he mentioned, the primary focus was making sure that building was evacuated so that nobody was injured, and there has been no reports of injuries at this point, so that's something to highlight here. And then also trying to keep people out of the line. We're lucky with the way that it's pushing, that there's not a lot of buildings out there. There is one structure that's farther east that could be threatened, also not populated right now. So we are very fortunate the way that the winds did push us. If they would have been coming from the other way, we would have had a probably much different response. There might have been some evacuations involved. So, so far we're lucky. We're going to be on this fire for potentially days.
Yep.
It's going to take a lot of water and a lot of time to put this out. They have lost a lot of product here. We tried to protect what we could, and we just kind of keep moving and keep redrawing that line as we can and keep redeploying resources to try to protect as much as we can.
What do you have to say to the crowds of Looky-Loos that have been just kind of flocking out here all day to get a look at the fire?
I would say we definitely understand that there is interest in these kind of emergency situations, and we want to let people know we're here to serve the community. So we never balk at the opportunity for the community to come out and see what we do in action. We just ask that our community understand that in the process of these emergency operations, to do their due diligence, be respectful of the authorities that are working throughout the area. With the potential for wind shift or changing conditions in these fires, sometimes they'll end up pushing people back a little bit further than maybe they would like to be. We do this as a safety measure for them, and we also need to have an understanding that with this type of operations, we are going to be expecting resources to be moving in and out of the area. So we also need to make sure we have good, clear lines of ingress and egress for those resources as they come into and out of the scene. And so we just ask people to be diligent, be respectful, and be understanding of the fact that we got a job to do, and we're doing our very best to make sure that we do that, and to just kind of cooperate with us in that. But definitely, if they want to stay back at a little bit of a distance and capture what we're doing and capture this fire, absolutely. Just kind of be mindful of what we're doing and help us do our very best.
And like Lieutenant said, the getting us our equipment in here is the most important thing. So with only one way in here and one way out, that access is kind of limited. So we just ask the people that are coming out to take a look to be mindful of it, pull to the right, make sure that they're letting these emergency crews in.
Do we know how many acres have been burned so far?
The last report I got from the wildland chief that had taken over was there was 2 acres burning, and that was probably 45 minutes ago. With these winds, it's probably increased even more than that, but it's 2+ acres of wildland involvement.
And just so we can confirm here, was that building lost? Was there a building lost here? The
So
recycling facility?
that big building behind us wasn't lost. It was definitely threatened. There is fire impingement on it. You can see that southern wall kind of melted and twisted up. We did have a crew inside that went in from the other side of the east side of the building and stretched the line interior to kind of protect that exposure and to try to stop the fire right there. So we're lucky that the winds weren't coming out of a different direction. And you can see since that fire has pushed away from the building.
For this type of a fire, and I know you guys mentioned that the wind is pushing this way, which is good because it's not threatening these types of structures. But if you guys are saying that this fire is going to be taking days and the wind pattern may change, at some point does that mean that these people may have to leave and be evacuated?
So as the primary fuel load of this fire, so the massive amount of plastics that are still continuing to burn behind us, as those continue to burn and that massive portion of it burns, the thing is that they'll have smaller groupings of that throughout the next 24 to 48 hour period that will then still be ignited. And basically what ends up having to happen is we end up having to get construction materials or a bigger heavy equipment to come out and start to scrape through that plastic and allow us to get from the stuff on top that may be ash or may have been somewhat extinguished and make sure that the stuff underneath is actually fully extinguished. So that's what ends up making these types of fires end up being long duration fires, right? With that, sometimes you'll still see some wispy smoke, maybe even some small portions of flames, but the biggest, largest amount of flame and fuel load and smoke that you're going to see is going to be at this initial portion of the incident. Once it transitions into where it's kind of like on the downswing of it, that it'll still be burning, but it'll be burning at a much lower level, and thus that kind of minimizes the possibility of spread into another. Could we still see some of that smoke lay over and go in a different direction? Absolutely, but hopefully the opportunity for fire to spread will be much more minimalized at that point.
Do we know what exactly started the fire on the plastic?
I don't have any reports of what started.
All of
They're
that is
probably
still
gonna
under investigation.
Yeah, they're going to be looking at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that again we this is a unified command. Both of our departments working diligently to do our best for the public. We do this all the time. We work really well together, and I have no doubt that that'll also continue on as far as the investigation portion goes, with our departments both working together to find out kind of exactly what happened and what could be beneficial in preventing this kind of thing in the future.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Roughly how tall are the flames right now?
Well, you can see some of the flame activity that going up through that smoke plume. And the thing about smoke is it's just unburned fuels. So there's been flames probably close to 100 feet in the air at times, not from the actual product that's burning, but from all the particulates that are up in the smoke that actually catches fire because it's so hot. We actually had to move equipment early on because we had equipment parked actually too close to that fire, and as it grew, we had to start moving some of that equipment back because there was definitely some of the biggest exposures we had were our own equipment.
Yep.
So
and I'm gonna reinforce exactly what the lieutenant was saying there. It wasn't that those were initially parked there, understanding that they were going to be pretty close. They were parked quite a ways off. As this fire grew in intensity and size, it pushed right into those, and that ends up becoming a delay in our operations and the ability to fight the fire effectively. We have to move those resources back a little bit further and relocate to the best position, and that also provides difficulty in us being able to get as quick a fight on this as we'd like to see.
So would we say it's over 50 feet, under 50 feet?
Well over 100-foot flame lengths
as you can see, those
as
flames
varies.
right there.
Yeah, well over 100-foot flame lengths as varies.
Okay.
Not uniformly throughout, but again, as the lieutenant was saying, that flame, if you can see it right here, it's still going up inside that cloud quite a bit further. So, well over 100 foot in the plume.
Is there anything else that you guys are able to tell us that we may not have asked that people should know or be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Once we got here, one of the responsible parties for the business was on site. They had indicated to us right away, as soon as they saw that the flames were there and that they had a fire going, they evacuated their facilities right away. So they were very diligent in making sure that their people got out and did the best they could to get them out of there and get evacuated from that area right away, and made sure they called us right away. And that gave us the best opportunity to get here and get started on this early, and probably what helped benefit in us being able to save as much of that building, working together to save as much of that building as we could. So that was huge. We want to give kudos to the RP and their people for making sure that they got their people out and safe right away, and then got us working here quickly to start doing our best.
And I think the other thing just to highlight is if something changes or there is a shift in wind or fire behavior, we'll get any notifications out to the public that we need to in case we do actually need to implement some sort of evacuation or kind of change how we're getting some of the word out into the public. So.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we just got a live update from fire officials with Bernalillo County and the Albuquerque Fire Rescue on that fire. They just tell us it is going to take several days to put out this fire, not several hours, several days. The reason being is the plastic there that is burning. They said at times flames were as tall as 100 feet, massive flames. So we have learned there are now multiple agencies that are on scene. There's Albuquerque Fire Rescue, the Bernalillo County Fire Department, Corrales Fire, as well as the Kirtland Air Force Base Fire Department there as well. We're told the fire is being fueled by the plastic, which you can see just how big those flames and that plume of smoke is. That is because of the plastic there that is burning, which is extremely hard to extinguish, and the 20+ mph winds, which is now pushing this fire. Luckily, it is pushing it away from the recycling facility. We do know the south end of that building has melted, but the building is not lost. Just slightly damaged there, but the winds are pushing the fire and the smoke in a direction that is, what we're told, not very populated in that area, which is good news. They do want to mention drivers, looky-loos, you are asked to stay away. There is only one way in and one way out from this fire, and there is a lot of fire trucks and fire crews that are going in and out. So if you do want to go and watch, they say that's fine. Just park away and just be aware of all the trucks that are coming in and out of that area. So far, at least 2 acres here have burned. That was about 45 minutes ago. So fire officials say that has probably grown because of that wind. So at least 2 acres there. The recycling plant building is being threatened at the time, but again, they are pushing that away, and you can see just the plume of smoke from our camera, from our photographer Patrick Jorgensen that is there, but you can just see that plume of smoke that is happening. Again, the cause of this fire is under investigation, but they say it's going to take days to put out. So as soon as we learn more, we will share that with you. But again, we'll have the latest coming up at 10 o'clock tonight. But for now, we'll go back to regular programming.